the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Now, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are absolutely fascinating because not only were they an ancient wonder of the world, but they were part of one of the greatest cities of the world in that time period. And the Bible has something to say about this city. If we look at Isaiah chapter 13, verses 19 to 22, it says, "And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited, nor will it be settled from generation to generation, nor will the Arabian pitch tents there, nor will the shepherds make their sheepfolds there, but wild beasts of the desert will lie there." And it goes on and talks about all the critters that are going to be, wild critters that are going to be there. And then it says, "Her time is near to come, and her days will not be prolonged." Now we want to turn over to Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 26. This is another biblical prophecy about the destruction of Babylon and what's going to happen. And it says in verse 26, "They shall not take from you a stone for a corner, nor a stone for a foundation, but you shall be desolate forever, says the Lord." And finally, Jeremiah 51:43, it says, "Her cities are a desolation, a dry land and a wilderness, a land where no one dwells, through which no son of man passes." Amazing. The Bible gives 7 different indications, biblical, prophetic indications of what will happen in the great city of Babylon. And we find that every single one of them has come to pass. Going real quickly through the 7 again, if you missed them as I was reading. Number 1, it'll be destroyed. Number 2, it will never be re-inhabited. Now, often cities are destroyed, but they're usually built up again and people live there. They choose these places for a reason, but no one ever went back to live in Babylon again. Number 3, Arabs will not pitch their tents there. Number 4, no sheepfolds, no place for the sheep to hang out. Number 5, wild beasts will occupy the ruins. Number 6, stones will not be removed for other buildings. And that is pretty wild because in that area of the world, stones were really quite special. In fact, they imported the stones that they used in the city of Babylon. They didn't use very many. Mostly it was bricks that they made right there on the spot. Lots and lots of bricks. But the stones that they had brought in, they left there. They didn't take them and use them for any other building, any other city. They were left there. That's very unusual in archaeology. Number 7, men will not pass by the ruins. Well, for all of time, from the time when Babylon was really deserted, it has never been on the top 10 lists of where tourists want to go. And so still, even today, men do not pass by the ruins. Now, according to the book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell, he says there's an unbelievable 1 in 5 billion chance that all 7 of those prophecies would come true. And they did. So the walls of Babylon were actually up for one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was included in a number of the lists, and eventually it fell off the side, and they made room for the lighthouse at Alexandria, which we'll talk about last. It was in the land between the 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This was the mightiest city in the world in its day. But as we mentioned, it was prophesied by Jeremiah that it would fall, and the last time that it fell, it was never rebuilt. The first city of Babylon was in the 1700s BC when Hammurabi, if you're familiar with him at all, he's the guy that figured out a new code of laws. It's very famous. If you start looking in old times, they're always talking about Hammurabi. Well, he was over the first city of Babylon in the 1700s BC. And during the reign of Sennacherib of Assyria, Babylon rebelled against Assyria, and Sennacherib destroyed the city in around the 690s BC, but it was rebuilt again in the 680s. Okay, it's back again. In 607 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar, good old King Neb, he really built up the city of Babylon. He ruled for 43 years. He built those giant walls and the avenues and the palaces and the temples, and we believe that he was the one that built the Hanging Gardens. Now in 539 BC, Babylon was captured by Cyrus, king of Persia. 482 BC, Babylon revolted, and the Persians didn't like it. Of course, people get uptight about when you revolt. And so they partly destroyed the city. By 6th century AD, it was lived in only by peasants in huts. And by the 13th century, it was totally abandoned. No one lived there after the 13th century AD. Now, when Herodotus saw it in 450 BC, this guy got around, okay? He wrote this: "In addition to its size, Babylon surpasses in splendor any city in the known world." He claimed that the fabulous wall surrounding Babylon was 56 miles in length. 56, this is a big city, okay? 80 feet thick. The walls were 80 feet thick, and they were 320 feet high. He said there was room on top for a 4-horse chariot to turn, and that 100 bronze gates were set in this mammoth wall. But that was only the outer wall. Within it, he said there was a second inner wall, though it's not as thick as the first, but it was still as strong. And he told of fortresses inside the city and temples with immense statues of solid gold and all kinds of spectacular features. He did not talk about the Hanging Gardens, which is interesting. We have to get our information from other people who saw it. Now, the Greek word for the Hanging Gardens is kremastos. Perhaps it's better translated as overhanging. You know, we think of the Hanging Gardens. What do they hang from? You know, do they have ropes up in the sky or something? What do they do it? Perhaps it means overhanging, like a terrace garden. It was a roof garden high above the city that Nebuchadnezzar built for his wife, who was the daughter of the king of the Medes, who she was from, well, the area of the Medes. They had all these beautiful mountains, and it was green and beautiful, and now you're living on the plains of Shinar and Babylon. It's dry and dusty, and it just doesn't look the same. And so she was homesick. And he said, okay, one artificial mountain with green growing things coming right up. According to ancient writers, they said that the Hanging Gardens were equal in height to the walls of the town. So that'd be 320 feet in height. And their numerous lofty trees afforded a grateful shade. The trees were 12 feet in circumference and 50 feet in height. Supporting these are 20 thick walls, 11 feet distant from each other. Now, do you understand? They were describing very specific things to look for. They said there was a range of stone arches over which was extended a 4-sided pavement of stone strong enough to bear earth piled high and water supplied for irrigation. And then this person who saw it a long time ago said, a distant spectator of these groves would suppose them to be woods, nodding on the mountains. Okay, a German archaeologist in 1899, a man by the name of Robert Kohldavi, first found the walls of Babylon. And then he verified much of what Herodotus said. He said, you know what? They really were 80 feet thick. They really were 320 feet high. He wasn't sure if they were 56 miles long, but he said, this guy, Herodotus, was pretty accurate. Then next, Robert Kohldavi found the base of the great ziggurat of Babylon. Then he found the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, and he believed that he found the Hanging Gardens at the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, reading again from that book by Robert Silverberg, he said, while working in the southern citadel one day, not far from the royal palace, Kohldavi came upon a brick staircase leading into a sort of basement. In the cellar, he discovered 14 large rooms whose ceilings were arches of stone. The use of stone at once struck Kohldavi as unusual, for stone was scarce in this part of Mesopotamia, and hardly any had been employed in the construction of the rest of the city. In all ancient descriptions of Babylon, only 2 buildings were said to have been even partly made of stone. These were the northern citadel, said to have had stone in its north wall, and the Hanging Gardens. Kohldavi had already excavated the north wall of the northern citadel, which did indeed contain large quantities of stone. Now he found a second stone building. Were these underground arch rooms the basement of the Hanging Gardens? Well, I don't know. I'm all in suspense. What happened? Well, he starts reading all these ancient guys and looking for what they said and how they described it. And he refused to jump to the conclusion that he had actually found the Hanging Gardens. He continued to dig. He wanted proof positive, and he found it. In one of the western rooms, he found a well. He said, it was a well which differs from all other wells known either in Babylon or elsewhere in the ancient world. This is a unique well, okay? It has 3 shafts placed close to each other, a square one in the center and oblong ones on each side, if you can picture that. An arrangement which he said, I can see no other explanation than that a mechanical hydraulic machine